Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Starts With You podcast, where today we are diving all into things health. And of course, if you've listened to the podcast before, you know this is an area that I'm obsessed with, not only personally, but also for so many of the clients that I work with or interact with. When we talk about being busy and having these big goals and being high achievers and high performers, well, we need to take care of ourselves and our physical body as well. So, Hannah, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So excited. So, Dr. Hannah Scherbarth, PT DPT, is a doctor of physical therapy and the owner of New Heights Physical Therapy, a holistic PT and wellness practice based in Heartland, Wisconsin. So, she's actually real close to me. We get to meet up in person, which is awesome. With a passion for empowering individuals to listen to and understand their bodies, Dr. Hannah specializes in chronic pain, nervous system regulation, which I'm so excited to talk about this because I've been diving into the world of this, and foundational movement retraining. Her approach goes beyond traditional physical therapy, blending evidence based techniques with a deep understanding of how the body's systems work together. Through personalized therapy plans, dry needling, brain spotting, which I'm really excited to dive into as well, and health coaching, Dr. Hannah helps clients navigate long standing challenges, including spine, joint, or muscle pain, headaches, stress, or trauma related body dysfunctions. Oh my goodness, so many things. Outside the clinic, Dr. Hannah enjoys spending time with her husband and Black Lab, backcountry canoe camping. Oh, that's cool. Running, rock climbing, reading, and exploring new heights on her own healing journey. Her ultimate goal is to blend science with compassion to help individuals with chronic health issues feel heard and empowered to reclaim control of their bodies.
Thanks for reading
Amazing.
that.
Yeah, it's so funny because when people hear it, like I intentionally like to read the bios of people when they're on. Like I know some people on their podcast, they like to jump right in. They'll record separately like the bio, but I personally love to read it live with my guest because all of you that I have on are amazing and you've done these amazing things. And sometimes when people read our accomplishments, we're like, we want to hide away and we're like, oh my gosh, hearing someone read it. But I like you guys to own it because that's amazing what you will help people with.
Yeah, that's so funny you say that because I just had that conversation with a client the other day, and I was like, you just said no to something huge that you haven't done in forever. I want you to celebrate it right now with me. Like, do it now. And when you read it back to me, I was like, huh, it's nice to hear this.
Yeah, I know some people, yeah, I will say, even as like a speaker, when people have to read my bio when I come on stage, sometimes it's like, oh gosh, is that me? But this is like for you to own it. So I'm so excited. So I
Yeah.
love doing that. So Hannah, I really want to start by diving into like what even got you into this field in the first place.
Yeah, that's actually kind of a funny story. I just said this. I'm really heavily involved in the Chamber of Commerce in town here, and I just did a plaque presentation for a new member. And he was a math educator before he became a financial advisor. And I said, that's so funny. Fun fact, I wanted to be a math teacher.
Hmm.
And then they're like, oh, so what got you into this? I'm like, well, in high school, everyone was like, you are so smart, you should be a doctor. And I was like, I will absolutely not go into healthcare.
Mm.
And now here I am. I'm in healthcare. But yeah, I think it was when I was in, what got me into, being a physical therapist in general was when I was in college, I actually went in undecided and was like, I have no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't decide on a major until sophomore year.
Mm.
And then I learned about athletic training and I think my block was always that there was nothing that I felt really connected me from like the schooling. I was always good at school, but I'm like, but then
Mhm.
what do I do with it? Like, why does it
Yeah.
matter? How do I make an impact? Like, I want to use what I'm learning, not just like learn a bunch of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, so I got into athletic training. I loved it. And then from there, I progressed into physical therapy. It was more of like an hours and scheduling thing. I was like, I don't want
Mhm.
traditional athletic training hours. If I'm going to
Mhm.
work in a clinic, I might as well go learn more, get a higher degree, make more money. Not that people go
Mhm.
into physical therapy for money, but
Right. Yeah,
but
but I
so
mean,
that's
it's a
kind of like
consideration when we're looking at jobs, right?
well, right. And so that's kind of like what led me into the doctorate of physical therapy program. And then it's so funny. I'm always like, I'm never going to do this, but this is the definition of never say never.
Yeah.
Because when I was in PT school, I had thrown around a couple times because I knew a few practice owners, PTs who own their own practices, and I was like, that's a lot of work. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
just don't want to do that. And I said, I will never own my own business. And
Mm-hmm.
here we
Right.
are. But it was all like a series of, I guess, fortunate events at this point that kind of got me
Mm-hmm.
into owning my own practice.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a practice that I loved as an employee. They got bought out by a hospital system 6 months after I started. I didn't really have a choice. My clinic manager was like, I'm going to start my own practice. I don't know how it's going to look, but you can come work with me if you want. And I had 3 days to make a decision of if I
Wow.
was like going to go or going to stay at this other like hospital-based clinic. They're like, nothing will change, which we all know is not the case.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, ultimately I went with her. I started in a single room we shared, and
Wow.
this was in St. Louis. We were in St. Louis, Missouri, and we shared a single room and a gym. She had built that practice, had been in St. Louis forever. I had only been there 6 months. So we had to share a table. So I had to like schedule around her, and she had almost a full schedule, and I had one person.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an adventure. But then ultimately, my husband Will and I opened another business called Fix, which we just recently closed, actually. We opened that in 2019 and decided, why shouldn't people get really great care for more affordable prices? Like, it should be more accessible to them. And so we created Fix as a mobile physical therapy platform. And that's how
Mm-hmm.
I started on my own, like completely on my own, is under that
Mm-hmm.
platform. And now I have a brick and mortar business, and I have an employee, and I have another PT who's a health coach. I have another health coach. Here we are.
That's amazing. So like a couple things I just want to highlight is first of all, and we hear this story a lot, like with you and with other guests I have on when I talk to, I love to hear their journey because most things don't end up the way we expect them to, right? Like I know when I got into business, like I didn't even know what an entrepreneur was for like the majority of like college and high school. Like I'm like people have like business. Like I thought of like when someone runs a business, I thought of like they own a manufacturing company or they own a restaurant, like a physical location. I didn't even know about this whole world of like coaching and what I do now. And then I remember when I got exposed to, I'm like, that's not me. I would never start my own business. That sounds so stressful. So it's so interesting how like you said, never say never, but how we can change and evolve as we change and evolve. Like our decisions can change.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And to know that you've grown, I mean, like even as you said it, I could kind of pick up on like this, like, oh wow, yeah, I own my, and I've seen Hannah's space, by the way. You're in like a new, even bigger space. It's amazing. So again, if you're local, we're gonna like do a big old plug for Hannah and her team because if you're local, it's absolutely amazing. And but yeah, you have a physical location, you have a team. Like, so what do you think? I'm curious about this before we dive into some of the things you see from people because um what got you into like okay I'm gonna do that like I didn't think I wanted to own my business but now I'm gonna do this like what actually helped you make that decision that yeah I'm gonna do this like you said that people should have really great care make it accessible but what's like the push that you're like okay this is it this is what I'm gonna do.
Mm. Wow, I don't know if I've thought about that in a while. Or if I ever thought about a specific incident when that happened. I mean, the moment that I knew I was already working with that other PT under her umbrella. Technically, I was independent. I was a contractor for her, but um, it was my husband who said it. He was like, "Why
Mm,
shouldn't he?" Like, came home from work one day and he said, "I had this idea. Why shouldn't people get the kind of care you're providing, but it's more affordable and it's more easy to access, and we could bring it to them?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" So it was really his idea to like build this whole platform out. But then I think the push was once we had it and we like actually dove into that whole thing because we had to hire the legal team and make all the stuff and once you invest all that money, we like did our own personal investment in that into that. It was like, well, now it has to work. And the only
yeah.
thing we could do to get that to start was to have a PT on the platform, which was of course me. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, now I got to go. Like I got to do this. So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like an external push of like, well, you have to make a living.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So let's do it. So it was, externally motivated by clients, but also then it became this like internal motivator of we must go now. But then
Mm-hmm.
we launched in November. or December of 2019. So
Hmm.
COVID. And I've heard that
Oh my
story on
gosh.
this podcast multiple times.
Yes, I was gonna say, yeah, that's obviously a lot of people's story who started businesses or were in business or decided to launch business right before everything
Yeah.
that happened in 2020. And then it's like pivot, pivot, pivot.
Hmm.
So you go all in, you're like, I love that too. Like, well, how can we bring this to more people? And so now you're in a location, like, in, I know I listed off when I introduced you, like, obviously your physical therapy, but I want you to talk a little bit more about like what makes you different? How do you have you differentiated yourself? Because I know you talk about beyond like physical, like the actual physical therapy. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. That's kind of funny too, because there was a whole period of time when I first like went when I went full time after COVID, because I had to get a different job for a while, but when I went full time after COVID, I even thought to myself, what do I call myself? Because I don't always feel like a physical therapist.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not a certified health coach. I haven't taken a certification in that, where the health coaches that are part of our practice are. But I was already doing that even when I worked in other settings. So it's really an integration. What we do is really an integration of our traditional physical therapy. So you're doing manual therapy, rehab exercises, neuromuscular reeducation. And when I started, it really centered on retraining mindful movement. And that's something that was huge and I learned from my mentor in St. Louis. But I was seeing over and over again in those other jobs that clients, we called them patients then. I call them clients now because I think it gives us more ownership. But
Mm-hmm.
clients weren't necessarily making progress when I would see them working with all these other PTs and when I would give them the traditional exercises I was trained in school. So I was like, we need to do this differently. And so more of like actually mindfully connecting to your body and the way you move and understanding why our bodies are the way they are and why our pain is there and why we move the way we do.
Mm-hmm.
That understanding I observed and I felt made clients improve that much faster and that much better because there was an ownership. Otherwise, and I've had clients come into me and say, yeah, I've done PT before and they gave me a bunch of exercises and I went home and I did them. I came back and then I did them in the clinic with them, but they were the same. Why am I paying for that?
Yeah.
And then they're like,
Personal experience in that.
and and then they're just like, but I'm not getting anywhere. But then I could almost give them the exact same. I could look through their exercises and be like, these are awesome. Do you know why you're doing them? You know what the point is? Like, you have
Mm-hmm.
pain. You came here with a goal in mind. And I think there was always a big disconnect there. And there is a big disconnect between what insurance wants and what the PT has to write in the note. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, here are the functional goals and what the client's goals are. So the client might say, like, I can't squat to pick up my kid and it causes me so much pain and then I'm not sleeping at night and this is causing me stress and whatever. There's this whole thing. And then the PT has to write, must improve knee range of motion to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Like, no one cares what that is. So here we really ask the clients, like, what are your goals? And then when we send them their email of goals, it's literally their goals in their words. We don't rewrite them. It's very functional. We're not doing all of those crazy measurements. But then we integrate, we understand that, yes, there needs to be an understanding and an education, but there's also so much more that contributes to pain. And that's one of the big things I teach people is pain is an output, not an input. And so we often think like, oh, I fell and hurt my shoulder. And so something in my shoulder must be wrong that is causing me to have pain. And that would be pain as an input, right? And so I fell, shoulder hurts, a signal goes to the brain of pain. But what's actually happening is I fell, my shoulder might have some like physical damage to it. Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
muscle strain, maybe there's, whatever happened, swelling in there. And those signals from the receptors go to the brain and say, hey, there's swelling. Hey, this stretched out a little too far. Hey, whatever. And if everything in your brain is like, there's not too much overloading it, it's like, okay, well, we'll send a little signal of pain like, hey, be careful when you move this. We don't want to overdo it so that it can heal, but it's still safe. So that could be maybe one hand, but maybe if a different person fell, hurt their shoulder, the signals go to the brain, but that person also has a newborn baby and they have like they're like stressing out about going back to work and they're not getting all the support they need in their community or like from their maybe they have a newborn baby and they don't have any support at home, right? Like maybe they're a single mom or maybe even it's just them and their partner and it's just like not enough, right? It takes a village. I'm not a mom, but I know it takes a village.
Yeah, yeah,
And so now that person's pain signals are going to say like, "Hey, we have all of this and there's something wrong with the shoulder." And the brain is like, "Yo, pay attention. This is way too much. We need to like make the pain signal bigger." Right? Like really you need to slow down. This needs to like
yeah.
become. So that's a big thing we train. And so those things that we have to address aren't just what's happening with the physical shoulder, which is what as a physical therapist we're trained to do, but
Mhm.
how are those stressors being managed? So it could be external stressors, it could be community support, it could be what's happening in your gut, your nutrition. Obviously, nutrition plays a role in healing, but it also plays a role in the like gut brain axis and in
Mhm.
how stress is managed. And so everything, how much are you sleeping, and is it the sleep that's the problem or is the sleep affected because of these other things? So
Mhm.
we really look at all of that. We don't even call our initial session an initial assessment. It's or an initial evaluation as you do in PT. We call it a comprehensive wellness assessment because we're really
Mhm.
trying to like bring it all together, and help people see, yeah, I know you want to fix this and you want us to do something about it, but you also have to take ownership and start to see like your mind plays a big role in your experience of pain.
Oh, I want to write that down. I'm
It
going
was
to say that
long,
again. Like, your mind plays a big role in your experience of pain.
right? It's the
People
way
pause
we,
on that one. Yeah,
yeah.
and I love that. Like, there's a couple things I want to. First of all, like some of the things I jotted down while you were talking was just this whole idea of think differently, right? So if you're somebody who's listening, like maybe it's not even that you have physical pain, or maybe you do, and you're like leaning into the episode right now, like, oh my gosh, Hannah, tell me, how do I fix myself? But even just from like, we can look at this from so many angles. Like, we can look at this conversation from somebody who wants to start their own business or wants to do something differently. And like, you just highlighted a few things of how people can differentiate themselves by thinking differently, by going against like what most people in your industry were doing, like right there, because then you're going to find the right people. So if we look at it from that angle, and if we look at it from people who, many of us who have physical pain or things, and you're like, oh my gosh, why won't it go away? Or I've done all of these different things. So I love that, like this whole idea of think differently. And then also that you're getting to like the why, the root cause, because obviously it's, if you've been anywhere in my community, if you listen to my podcast, you follow me, I'm very open about sharing that I've had so many gamut of things happen over the years with physical pain, and I know that there's a mental and emotional, like all of this stuff tied to it. So I'm obsessed with thinking about this, but it's not that common in traditional healthcare to talk about this kind of stuff. So I'm curious, knowing that these are like the different things you do, what are some sort of like common, I don't know if there's like any common themes or common things that you see people come to you with?
Mm, yeah. I think a typical answer that you might expect from a physical therapist, you might expect for me to say is like, oh, low back pain, right? Like some kind of like physical. And yeah, we see a lot of low back pain, shoulder pain, neck pain, headaches, whatever. And that's fine. But the theme that underlies it all is that two things, I think. One is that our clients' goals are all the same. Like when I do a discovery session, I always ask like, what do you want? Like what are you trying to achieve? Where are you going? What's your vision? And they're like, I want my pain to go away. I'm like, yeah, but
Yeah.
what do you want? And I have to ask, like, what's that bigger picture? And they all kind of say the same thing. And I hear it in many forms, but it's funny how many people say this. They say, I want to age gracefully. I want to
Mm,
be functional as long as I can. And it's more of like, when it really comes down to it, it's not, I want my pain to go away. It's all of that wrapped up. They just don't see it yet. They don't see that
yeah.
age gracefully means they have to look at all of these realms of their life, right? Excuse me. So that's the one thing. And then the other theme I would say is that, and we were kind of talking about this right before we started recording, but the other theme I would say is that so many of our clients are high achieving, high performing. And it doesn't even matter if it's like work or life. It's like you have your own internal drive to like be better and be the best you can be. And so there's this like underlying vibe almost, like this underlying vibe of I must do more all the time. Like I am not doing enough now, or, and that's what we see too. The clients come in, like you had mentioned, and
Hmm.
they'll say things like, well, I've done all the things. I've tried this and this and this, and I've done 3 different chiropractors, and I did PT once, and it was awful. And, I've had people come in and tell me they've done PT and they're skeptical. Like they're not even sure why they're sitting across from me. And I think it speaks to them as a human because it's not for a lack of effort that
Yeah.
they have this pain. And they've tried all the things. And they think like, I think that also compounds on it. I see often, I've tried all the things, I've done all of this, and it's not getting better, and no one can help me. But they also have this, they don't see this and say it, but they also have this kind of air of like, I can't help myself. Like, I don't
Hmm.
know how to help myself. And it's just like, okay. And they don't, again, they don't say that, but
Hmm.
that's kind of the underlying theme under
Yeah.
the pain.
Well, like what you're able to see. And it's so interesting. Yeah, because I think there is a huge correlation between people who are like high stress, high achieving, high performer, because there's this tendency to just like run, 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 run. And your body is sending you these little signals saying, hey, we need you to rest. We need you to slow down. And we don't listen. We don't listen. We don't listen until your body's like, boom, okay, if you're not going to listen, I'm going to make you listen. And then it gives you
Hmm.
something really big, right? So I think but also it's really interesting what you just hit on is when somebody is high achieving and they're like a problem solver or they're like, whatever comes at me, I can take it on. There's
Hmm.
probably then this sense of, I mean, I know for me, just speaking personally, like this sense of guilt then that you're like, I'm trying all these things. Why can't I do it? And then you feel defeated and you feel frustrated and you feel angry. And then we know emotion gets stored. So it's like this like constant revolving thing. And so I'm so curious. I want to talk a little bit about brain spotting because you've
Yeah.
mentioned how there's like all these different components to it. We've got the physical pieces, which you can help with physical therapy. But for some of this stuff that people are like, okay, I've tried all this stuff. So tell us a little bit about what is brain spotting and how you've incorporated this.
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to my own story. And it's funny you said that because when I just went through all that, I don't know if you heard my voice crack when it was like, I can't do it myself. I like felt that in me because it's my story too. Right. And so that was kind of what led me to it. I met by chance a mental health therapist local here. She's phenomenal. And I decided I had tried brain spotting in 2013 once, way before I was ever ready to do anything with that. And I was like, this is crazy. I don't know if I can swear on here, but I was like, this is complete bullshit. Like, what am
Yeah,
I
you
doing?
can.
And then, yeah, I met this therapist who does brain spotting, and she's trained, certified in it. And I started brain spotting with her myself. And I did that on a regular basis. I did it weekly, so I've had chronic pain as well. And so that was part of why I started. There's all the other things that come along with like being high achieving, whatever. So I started going to therapy, did brain spotting about once a week. Ultimately, by the time I took the course a year later, I took the phase 1 course. I probably was doing it like twice a month or every other week with her, but I was in it at this point and I hadn't really ever committed. But as I did it, I saw more and more how how it was helping me in all the aspects of my life beyond why I went to therapy. Right. And I was like, I learned how our body stores, like you said, we store emotions, they get stuck in our body. The things we don't move out, they get caught there. And I see another theme commonly is in high achievers and high performers. A lot of these things do show up as something physical. It could be
Yeah.
pain or gut or whatever, because you're not listening otherwise. It's not until it's limiting you that you're like, so where in other realms it might be something else. It might show up as depression or, I mean, I feel like we all have anxiety, but
Yeah, I
like,
know. I think nowadays we all do.
yeah, right. But so when I took, it was my therapist who said, I think we were like 6 months into this, and she said, Hannah, you can get trained in this. There's another PT who's trained in this, and she told me how this and I haven't taken her course yet. I'm so excited to do it. But she's like, there's this other physical therapist, and she's certified brain spotter, and she really integrates this with her manual therapy. And I was like, that's what I need to do. Like, I just knew, but I was not in a place for it. So it wasn't until like another 6 months that I took the phase one course, and I had a wild experience. It was, I was obviously doing it, so I was bought in, and I had a couple very specific brain spotting experiences that helped me get that buy-in. Like a really quick aside of like an example of that was in 2019, I was in a rollover car accident. It was weather related, and after the car accident, I could never drive. Like not drive in weather. So even if
Yeah.
it was like sprinkling or raining, I would have to pull over on the highway because I'm like, it is not safe for me to go 25 miles an hour, and I'd be like full on panic attack, and I just
Yeah.
like couldn't drive. And then I went into one of my early brain spotting sessions, probably in the first 6 weeks, I think it was. And I wasn't going into work on that, but I was supposed to go on a trip that day. Couldn't because it was snowing. I told her that, and she's like, maybe this is something to work on. I'm like, okay, of
Yeah,
course
you're
it
like,
is.
"Oh, okay."
So I ended up brain spotting around this car accident. And this is another example of like, what am I even doing here? I left that session so mad. It's like,
Mm,
what did I even do? Am I wasting my time and money? Nothing is happening in here. And because brain spotting is interesting, you're like looking at a pointer or a spot in space, and you're just sitting there. Like
yeah.
that's what it feels like when you start. You're just staring at
Okay.
this little
Yeah.
spot, and you're like, okay. And when you're new to it, you're like, this is weird. I'm just staring at this spot, and my
Yeah.
therapist is looking at me, and I don't know what's going on. And so I remember leaving there being so mad. 3 days later, I was driving on the highway, holding onto my steering wheel. I was driving one handed, and I realized that for like 5 minutes, it had been pouring rain. And I
Wow.
didn't even notice. And I was like, oh my God, I'm driving.
Yeah. Oh, that gives me like
I
goosebumps
know.
because it is so crazy to see how those things. And again,
Yeah.
just like the way you explained it, especially again, think of like us high achievers who are like, well, I need to be doing something because
Yeah.
you're sitting in a session, like looking at a spot, you're sitting there. I could see just like myself getting like so anxious, like, what am I doing? Let's do
Yeah.
something.
Right.
But look at the change that it had.
What'd
So
you
then you're
say?
like, okay, I'm in. I'm all in.
Yes. So then I was all in. So that's what kept me with it. But in the course, we have to do brain spotting, right? You learn about it, you learn all this stuff, but then we had to do 4 brain spotting sessions, and I decided through other things I was doing energy work and chiropractic and massage and my own rehab and all these things. I finally realized that there was a correlation, or I thought my chronic pain was related to a different accident I was in 2012, but my pain didn't start until 2 years later. And so in my
Mm,
head, it never even like that's not where my pain came from because I got hit by a car in 2012, but I didn't have pain until 2014. And it
mm,
just like came out of nowhere, right? Like what
mm,
23-year-old gets throws out their back spitting out their toothpaste? Well, I did.
mm.
So and that's how it
Amazing
all
skill
started.
set you have there to be able to do that.
So then when I did the course, the point of me saying that is that I decided, you know what? I'm just going to go in and be curious, which is still so hard for me. I've been doing brain spotting for a couple of years now, and it's still very difficult for me when I go in. Um, I put up all my defense mechanisms when I do it, but during the course, I decided I'm going in curious. I'm going to brain spot around the bike accident. And I I had 4 brain spotting sessions. They're full. So 4 45-minute sessions in 48 hours, which was when you brain spot, part of it is opening up. So I guess I should talk about what brain spotting
Mhm.
like actually is. The kind of one of the main ways to describe it, and I actually got this from my therapist. She says brain spotting is bridging the gap between what you think and how you feel. And so our
Mm,
logic brain often like our problem solving, we're trying to figure it out, we're trying to fix, but then what is our body actually feeling? How are we responding? And we're often so far removed from that.
mhm.
Again, like why pain shows up for like
Yeah.
people like us. Um, and so you're looking at the spot, you're bringing up a situation, you're thinking how does this feel in my body, where is it located, because there's this there I mean the way your circuitry of your subconscious brain, your subcortical brain is wired is, I mean, it is so elaborate, and we you cannot explain the way your brain builds these circuits from the initial instance. So you might have to like backtrack through all these things that seem completely unrelated, which is partially why that session about the car accident, I was like, what am I doing? Because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like sitting here thinking about shit. Like, what is
Yeah.
happening?
Yeah. Like what's going on?
Right. And so you're really trying to bridge that gap. And it's hard to do, which is why you do it in a therapy session with somebody because you need to kind of like need help regulating and doing this. So I took the course, I did those 4 sessions, and I'm not going to go into all of the details because that could go on forever. But
Yeah.
the after the second day of the course, I think at that point I had brain spotted twice, maybe 3 times. I think it was 3 times. And on my ride home, I was in such terrible pain that I had to pull over, all these things. And I was like, what is happening? But it wasn't my chronic pain, it was different.
Yeah.
But by the time I got home, it was like a 40-minute drive home. By the time I got home, I was like, it's gone. It stopped. What is happening? So after a brain spotting, like a processing session, your brain and body continue to process pretty heavily. And
Mm.
the guide kind of is like 48 hours, but sometimes it like cuts it off and because you have stuff to do, and then it picks it back up 48 hours later. So I
Mm.
was just like heavily processing because I had done 3 sessions
Yeah.
within my
So your
processing, like,
body's just like,
yeah, yeah. But what blew my mind was after I had been doing things for years for my physical pain, I did that weekend course. I didn't have any pain. And I had not had a day without pain for years, like 8 years at that point. Like I'm going on a decade now. And I had zero pain, 0 out of 10 pain for 3 weeks
wow.
straight.
Wow.
And I
Yeah.
was
I'm like,
like,
what does having no pain feel like?
yeah, I know. And now I mean, now there's been a lot more time since then. So I have a lot of I have a lot more data points and information to kind of see like and I'm not pain free, but I do have
Mhm.
times where I'm like, oh, the pain is better or it's changing and I can see how it's evolving. And it's definitely not as intense. And after that, I definitely started to see in my clients like, mm, this is, you've made it so far with all of our treatments. Why are you stuck here? And then we
Mm.
might use brain spotting to get curious about why are you stuck here? What's underneath this? Kind of like my situation where I didn't even know my pain was related to this accident, which if
Mhm.
you look back, it's like, well, yeah, Hannah, you got hit by a car. Of course that's what it is.
Yeah.
But I had buried that so far down that I actually forgot I got hit by a car for years. Like it was like, so that was in there somewhere. But I see that in my clients and it's like, there's more to this. And I kind of like bring it in. I'm like, because a lot of people like I was, a lot of people are
They're
like,
like,
no, I'm not doing that.
yeah.
I don't want to
Yeah.
do
Just
that.
like
I don't want to open up any
fix my
cans of worms.
knee, fix my back, fix my shoulder. We
Yes,
don't want to go. We don't want to open up the box of
that's right. So yeah, so we see that a
that
lot. But
is I love how you just like I want to highlight. So first of all, thank you for sharing your story because I think for people, especially that had never heard of brain spotting before, or even like maybe I think some people listening might be like, this is so far beyond like what I ever thought. And I think then there's also a lot of people in my world who are like, really tuned into this type of stuff and nervous system regulation and there's all the sorts of different therapies out there and somatic and healing and breath work, like all these things. So I think there's like a gamut of people, but I appreciate you sharing the story because for people who are like, I don't really get what this is, first of all, just like your experience, but then also making that connection between the physical and like the mind and the emotions, like all of that things and like how you experienced it. And I love that with your clients, you probably kind of tiptoe into like depending where they're coming from. Like they might come in and be like, I want this now. I want to do this because I want to go there. And other people you might be like, hey, like you said, like we've been working on these, physical things and we're not making progress. Like, are you open to trying this? And so really being able to integrate that is such a huge value for people that don't get that anywhere else.
yeah, yeah. And
What
I
would
think
you
it's fun to see too my clients who really embrace that when they originally didn't embrace it.
mm,
It's fun to see their progress. And I do have to say, I had those couple experiences where I had these big changes. That's not the case, right? Like I have been consistently doing brain spotting therapy personally with my therapist for years, and I see changes in in myself and how I perceive my pain and how I give compassion to my body to help tolerate that more over time. Right. And so that's a hard thing for people is like you said, most people are like, but I can't do this now. Like, and that's how I used to be like, I can't handle this anymore. I need it gone. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just need to keep doing the things and like sitting here and looking at this spot is not going to do anything for me.
Yeah.
Right. But it takes time and patience. So in the clients who really embrace like, okay, I can start to see these little changes and I help point those out like, hey, I've never seen this from you before. Like, look at what you did. This is amazing. And it really helps them see like, oh, there are big changes being made. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's fun to see too how much more they're connected with their body, but not necessarily with their pain. And so it doesn't like rule over them as much.
Mm-hmm. And as you were just talking, I was just thinking too of like how much benefit there is, like of even just the slowing down. Like slow down is what literally just like popped into my head while you were talking. Like those of us who feel anxious or feel stressed or feel like they are always running in a million directions, and so then they're getting physical symptoms and all of that. It's like, well, I need to do more. I need to do more. I need to do more. And then we're not slowing down, like that whole thing we talked about before. But it's just this idea of like when you have to sit in it and like feel it and experience it or work through it, like even that process of slowing down, I feel like your body can finally like exhale and just be like, thank
Hmm.
you for like taking a beat here and like just like listening to me. That's been throwing out the red flags at you saying, hey, please listen, something's off.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, slowing down has been such a huge thing. And that's the thing I really try to get my clients to understand and embrace. But it's a hard thing for high
Yeah.
achievers to slow
Yeah, I mean,
down.
I can say this, and then in the next second, I'll be like, oh my
Right.
gosh, I have all these things to do. So I'm
Right.
curious. So for people listening who are like, okay, I really am resonating with this. I'm feeling this physical pain, or I'm just kind of curious about this. What, if anything, are things that you could even recommend that they start doing now? Like, of course, come to see Hannah if you're local, or find someone, find a way to dig into this. But what are even some things that people could be doing on their own to get started to either like tune in more or get more aware of where the pain is? Like any tips you have?
Yeah. The other thing I would say, if you do want to work with me or anyone, you can brain spot virtually. So if there's not someone in your area, you can find a therapist, you know, like if you want to brain spot around something that's very therapy related, like go find a great brain spotting mental health therapist. I'm happy to try to connect people, but a lot of people do that virtually. So I want to say that it's
Yeah.
possible. So you don't feel
Ooh,
like, well,
okay.
I'm in this little place and I don't have any resources. Like
Yeah.
someone in your state can help you on the computer. But I think it's a big question, even though it seems like what is something that someone could start with. Um, I mean, I am a huge fan of meditation, but meditation is a really hard thing. And it's hard, especially again for high achievers, high performers, or people with pain to sit down still immediately and just be like, I'm going to sit here and just try to like let my mind be whatever it is. It's hard to do that, especially when you have chronic pain. And I mean, speaking from personal
Mhm.
experience, because you sit there and you're like, oh, this hurts, right? And you can't think of anything else.
Mhm.
So I think one thing I would say is maybe just like like making your own meditation practice, and maybe don't even call it meditation. Like I call my time I do, while sometimes I'm doing meditations, sometimes I'm doing breath work, sometimes I'm just saying like I'm going to go sit still, right?
Mhm.
And so when I started, I had to tell myself, you have to do this for 30 seconds. Like
Mm.
just a little bit. And I also you have to have the mindset of like, it kind of sucks at first.
Yeah.
Like it's not easy to just go sit and start with it. And you have to understand you're not going to be good at it. Just like the first time you played your favorite sport, you weren't good at it.
Mhm.
You're going to sit and your mind's going to be distracted and it's going to wander and you're going to feel your pain and you're going to be mad at yourself. And these things might happen. I mean, you might sit and be like, oh, I loved that. That was great.
Yeah.
Perfect. Then do more.
Good for you.
Good for you. That's awesome. And it is awesome. But I would say sitting, like just practicing stillness and figuring out what that means for you, right? Like maybe
Mhm.
stillness is, it involves something. I learned about like tea ceremonies. I don't do this regularly, but sometimes I do a tea ceremony. And so you're sitting in stillness, but you're doing something with your hands. right? Or maybe you have to sit in stillness, but maybe when you start, you can't be still. So you like bring a fidget toy with you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you're still like doing that. But the point is that when you sit in stillness, you're observing your body without
Mm-hmm.
judging it, without trying to change it, without thinking, oh, I feel this pain here. You know, this is what my brain would do. Oh, I feel this pain here, so I better go get this rehab tool and do this right after I'm done, right? Like when the pain comes in, something you can tell yourself is like, okay, I see you, I feel you, I know you're here, you're welcome here. And I've told my clients that, like, welcome your pain into your body, not because you're accepting that it's there yet, right? And not that it's never going to go away, but just like it's a compassion practice. It's like
Yeah.
offering yourself compassion and like loving yourself. Like that's the biggest thing I've learned because we're always just like, I'm not enough like this. I got to do the next 10 things. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a lack of compassion for where we're at. So
Mm-hmm.
I think when you start to like regulate your nervous system that way, the tension reduces, the intensity of pain reduces. So finding those practices are really helpful.
I love that. I mean, like the two big things I just jotted down for like myself and as like takeaways, like the stillness and compassion. Like if we were to summarize that in two words, it's like how
Mhm.
can I lean into more stillness and being okay that that means different things for different people. I love that you said it because some people meditation doesn't jive with them or they're like, oh, I don't want to do it. And so then they don't even try any practice because they're like, it's this or nothing. So I love that
Right.
just like sit still, sit in stillness, like whatever that means for you, and then give yourself compassion and like that's
Mhm.
a starting point. So I love those tips. Okay, so two more things before we wrap up is I love to ask my guests. The name of the podcast is It Starts With You, Hannah. So what
Yes.
does It Starts With You mean to you?
You know, it's funny because I listened to your podcast. I knew this was coming. I didn't even didn't
Yeah,
plan.
good because I like to
Um,
keep it like a
um, yeah, I think it goes back to the stillness and compassion. It to me, it starts with you means that you are in full control of what is the way you're responding to what is happening to you, right? And that it bleeds into all areas of your life, right? Like the most business growth I've ever had has come when I'm doing personal stillness and meditation and mental health therapy, right? Like,
mm-hmm,
and brain spotting. And that was all for personal things, but the business grows. So I
mm-hmm,
think like it starts within you. And that's why we need to be in touch with our bodies because
mm-hmm,
it's all here. The answers are all here. And I know that's so cliche and all the coaches say it. You probably say it. I say it. Everyone says it. Like all the answers are within us. And again, I used to think that was crap, but
mm-hmm.
that's a real deal. Like I'm a
That's
very
what it is.
science
Like
brain and
I think almost like even when you just said that, I'm like, I think the reason, and we might be making an assumption because I also do think like, yeah, I say it, people say it, I think people get annoyed with it. I don't know if they do or not,
right.
but I think maybe the reason that people get frustrated with it is because then they have to stop looking at everybody else and looking outside of themselves and they have to sit in stillness and they have to find the answers when it can be sometimes easier to, hey, what do you think I should do? Or
Mhm.
like, listen to the podcast, listen to the books and just keep consuming information without actually making change. And so I think if people get triggered by hearing like, well, you have the answers, it's like because there's almost this like responsibility then to own that and make decisions on that. So that was just something that came up for me, but I love how you said that around like you get to decide, you have ownership of how you do those things. And yeah, and just really thinking about like I do have the answers. Like I have them. I just have to unbury all of the shit on top of the answers. Like I feel like that's how I
Mhm.
think of it. Like they're in there, they're in the core. I believe it's in like in your gut and in your soul, but like you got to find it and that requires you to be in stillness.
Right, it does. I think the
Yeah.
thing I want to say too, like going to the stillness and trying to find those things, it doesn't look the same every time you do it, right?
Yeah.
People think, "Oh, this worked for me." And so the next time it doesn't work, they're like, "Well, now screw it. I'm done." Right?
Mm.
And I'm not going to find the answers, but like my stillness looks different every day. I have a morning routine that's different every day. It's a routine, but it's different every day because it's what do I need, you know? And it took me years. It took me years to learn it, and it still takes me years. Like even when you just said something about like, oh, now I have to like get in here and sit in this. I was like cringing because I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Like,
shit. I got to
yeah,
do
I don't want to do that.
that. So yeah, I mean, It's a good point.
These
Just
are I love that you said that too. And the last thing, oh my gosh, I'm like, we could have
I
like a
know.
part two because I'm like, we have so many things. Last thing I want to say on that though, I love, and I'm actually going to jot that down. This is what I always say with my guests. I always leave with like my own little homework assignments or things I want to dig into. And I hope everyone listening, you do too. Like, he and I were just talking about beforehand, like I've had such great guests on here. Like I just love, and I want to go back and listen to all my guests because they give you so much stuff. So thank you for joining
Hmm.
us. But the thing you said about like it doesn't have to look the same all the time, that's something that I've been struggling with because I've had a morning routine for years. I loved it. I was obsessed with it. And now for the last like I would say almost a year, it feels it feels constricting or it feels like it's not working for me anymore. And I'm in this like and I think even physically, like it's been harder on me to maintain what my morning routine was. But I've like have this resistance to changing it because it was part of who I was. So I love even just like you tell like giving me permission, but giving other people like give yourself permission that that can like it can change and it probably should change at different stages of your life. And again, this is all tied into like the physical pain, what's going on emotionally. But I think we can get so hung up and stuck in like, well, this is what I was working for me. This is what I always did. And now it's like, wait, why would I change it? But your body's telling you, hey, you need to change it.
Hmm. And part of the resistance comes from knowing that that change period, you don't know how it's unknown how long it's going to take, and that's kind of scary. And it's hard. Like finding it is hard, and you're kind of out of rhythm, and you're like, I just can't get it. Like I feel like that's what I'm in right now. Is I'm in the change period. Like my morning routine is different all the time because I'm like, is it a morning routine that I need, or what exactly is the thing?
Mhm.
But I've been more compassionate about like it's okay to keep trying. It's okay that it looks different. So yeah,
Mhm.
you have permission.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to work on that. Oh, Hannah, this was such a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, for taking the time to share with us your experiences, your story, and just some things for people to be thinking about that I know for so many people listening that they're sitting there going like, probably nodding their head listening to this. So how can, first of all, what do you have going on right now that you want to share with our listeners? And also how can people find you, stay connected and, kind of tune into the work that you're doing?
Yeah, we have a couple things coming up. One of them is we're doing a virtual. This is fun. This is a virtual workshop, the first one we've ever done. So God, I hope it works out. I got to
Oh,
figure out the
nice.
logistics.
It will. Everybody listening attend to
Yeah.
help Hannah with her first virtual one.
Yes. So it's a Circle of Life workshop. Uncover what nourishes you and cultivate balance. It
Mm.
is on. We'll put all the details like. It's on our website, and the website link will be in the show notes, I know. But that's on Wednesday, February 12th at 7 p.m. Central Time with our health coach, Brian Zulke. And it's going to be great. So it's really going to the little blurb is through guided exercises and practical strategies, you'll gain a deeper understanding of your personal circle of life, identifying areas that energize you and those that need more care.
Mm.
So you can find the details for that on our website. And then this is a little more physical therapy based, but we have an ongoing balance workshop, strong and
Mm.
steady balance workshop, just to help build confidence in movement, make sure you're using your balance strategies throughout life. And that's the first Friday of every month at 10 a.m. here at our space in Heartland. And then the last big thing we have coming up is our grand reopening in our new space and ribbon cutting. And so that'll be open house style. We're going to have lots of raffles, and I'm partnering with the Chamber of Commerce for their business after hours event. So it's also a really great
Oh, cool.
networking opportunity for businesses. Julie, you're invited. Everyone's
Oh,
invited, but
okay. Let me add this to my calendar. I need to put this on there.
so that is on February 18th. That's a Tuesday at
Okay.
4:30 to 7. But all our events are on our events page on our website, which is newheightsphysicaltherapy.com. You can get in touch with me at Hannah at newheightsphysicaltherapy.com, or we're on Facebook as New Heights Physical Therapy Lake Country, and then Instagram at newheights.pt.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm so excited for those events. So we'll drop that, like Hannah said, we'll drop those in the show notes. Go ahead, check those out, the links. Follow her on social media. When you listen to this episode, let her know. Like, I know I say this all the time, but honestly, like, people don't realize that, like, if you're listening and you're like, oh my gosh, I just had an insight, or she just said something that stuck with me. Like, just send a message. Like, just send one of us a message, because we want to hear that. We want to know, we love helping and supporting people. And so we want to know what's landing for you. And then, of course, share it out, tag us, so that we know that you've been listening to the episode. So, Hannah, thank you so much again for joining us. And for our kind of like signing off today, I'm just going to remind people of the two things that you said at the end about leaning into stillness and giving yourself compassion. All right, everybody, till next time.